minutes past 11, and I'm your host, Razia Rangrage. Do join us live on Facebook as well as we chat about something very important that's happening. When we get on the road behind that steering wheel, there's something we face: road rage. Shall we talk about that this morning? Why not? Now, fear of road rage is actually growing among South African motorists as experts warn that stress, trauma and violence are pushing ordinary driving incidents into dangerous territory. So to join us about this topic and help us to understand and unpack this, we're joined now on the airwaves as well as on the screens by clinical psychologist and Institute for Security Studies researcher Thandi van Heiningen. Good morning, Thandi. Good morning and welcome to Urban Women.
Good morning, Razia. It's such a pleasure this morning. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to talk about this important topic.
Yeah, it's so important because, we spend most of our times on the road and sometimes we wonder what is going on. Sometimes I sit with people that are just swearing a car that goes past and you wonder, okay, what's going on? Let's understand this, right? Road rage seems to be escalating into something far more dangerous in South Africa. Share with us, from your perspective, what is driving this increase in aggressive behavior on our roads?
Okay, so I think that we need to not panic and become fearful of road rage in itself, because road rage is actually not happening in isolation from what is happening in society more broadly.
Right.
Is there an echo for you as well, or is it just for me?
No, it's for you.
Okay.
We can hear you clearly.
Okay,
right.
So what I wanted to say is that in South Africa we're already dealing with high levels of stress and violence in our community and also in our homes. It's everywhere, and there's high levels of crime, so people are carrying high levels of stress. And what we are seeing is that minor incidents on the road are becoming there's an opportunity, or they're becoming further escalated into situations of road rage. So it's more about the pressure that we under and how we respond in everyday situations, and whether those stress situations become something that then escalates into something a little more violent and potentially deadly, or whether it's something that we can deal with in a calm manner.
That is so true, because it's like, I'm also a life coach and I do, much deeper therapy as well. And I say we are all like either a perfume bottle or a doom bottle. So wherever we go, this is the energy we're giving off. And you're right, people are going through a lot. So perhaps there's that trigger and they use this as an avenue and as an outlet to kind of release, because it can be something that seems trivial to one person, but their reaction may be completely different. Now, you also mentioned, Thandi, that many South Africans are already under emotional pressure before going into their cars. And I know, I'm actually a victim of crime where I was attacked as well, and you get into that and you're in a fearful state, but it can be any sort of pressure. We don't know. Everyone's got their different journey. How much do stress, unemployment and daily life frustrations actually contribute to road rage incidents?
Well, Razia, they're actually quite significantly, and I think they are the pressure cooker that kind of gets the pot to blow its lid off, so to speak. So chronic stress, when people are under chronic stress, it affects their ability to regulate their emotions and to respond calmly when they are in a pressure situation. And unfortunately, situations like financial strain, unemployment, insecurity in a crime-ridden even being on the road for long times, like commuting, that can deplete your ability to cope, or you have that emotional resilience to cope under And that means that people become more reactive to stressful situations. They become more impatient. They might be more likely to interpret a situation as a hostile situation or a disrespectful, someone acting towards them in a disrespectful way. And so even a little incident can trigger a disproportionate response.
As you say, they may interpret it. So it's the lenses through which we see, and that interpretation that gives that whole experience some another kind of a narrative. Tiny, why do you feel that people actually often behave very differently behind the steering wheel than they would face to face?
You know, Razia, this is such an interesting phenomenon for me as well. I think that when you're in a car, it creates a psychological sense of distance and anonymity. So you are like a little bit more distance than if you were, say, walking past someone and they bump you in the street. When you're in your car, you're surrounded by a shell and it's seen as a protective shell.
Protected.
So inside a car, you're also separated from others, which also reduces a feeling of empathy and connection to others, which might reduce that restraint. So so I think some people, when they're driving, they kind of may react differently to or do things that they wouldn't do if they were with someone face to face. So then there's also a sense of territory, like this is my car and this is my space, and they can interpret or feel like the car is an extension of themselves. So if someone cuts them off or hoots at them, it can feel very personal, like a direct, and at the same time, when you're driving, you need to be alert and you have to have quick reactions, which already places your nervous system under stress. So when you combine all these things together, this is your feeling anonymous, feeling a little bit disconnected or having less empathy for the person in the car next to you, already feeling frustrated and then perceiving disrespect or aggression, you can become more responsive and maybe in a negative way, which is unfortunate.
Very unfortunate. And you're definitely steering our understanding to what we need to pay attention, like more towards. So, would you say that road rage is basically sometimes less about the actual driving incident and more about unresolved stress or trauma people are carrying from other parts of their lives?
Absolutely. I think, as I said earlier, like the driving incident is not the root cause; it's the trigger for the behavior. So there are other things that have been bottling up and have been boiling underneath that get you to the point where there's this quite serious reaction. So people can be carrying that unresolved anger, chronic stress. They might have had previous incidents where someone has harmed them or attacked them. They may be carrying trauma. And that's in a moment where a small incident on the road can then become something much bigger. So it can escalate. And I think this is important in South Africa because, we live in a society where unfortunately we are more exposed to violence and insecurity. A lot of people have been victims of crime, and not just, quite violent crime. And so being in that state where you are, it's called the fight and flight state, where your brain is functioning not on a rational thinking, in a rational thinking where you're more likely to react or respond when you perceive a threat. It's like a survival mode. And for some people, the flight part is, I'm going to run away and get out of the situation. But for others, they want to fight. And that's where the aggressive reaction can come out. And that can become very dangerous when weapons are involved, when people have firearms or other weapons. So, unfortunately, I think a lot of road rage incidents happen on our roads, but they don't reach the media because they don't end in a death. Unfortunately, fortunately, they don't end in death, but there are other incidents where people will assault each other, or it just become very aggressive, driving in a dangerous way, and so on, which is something that we really need to take note of.
Indeed. And with now, Tandy, everyone has a phone. So you'll notice people are very quick to take out their phones as well. So
Yeah.
social media seems to be circulating shocking videos of rage incidents.
Yeah.
Do you think this repeated exposure to violence can normalize aggressive reactions for some people?
Well, I think so. I mean, the problem is it's not just social media. We I mean, yeah, there is a lot of research. We do research on violence prevention at the Institute for Security Studies. So we look at all the factors that drive violence in our society. And unfortunately, in South Africa, violence is pretty normalized as a way to resolve conflict or to get your way. It's used in families, through corporal punishment of children or their very high rates of intimate partner violence and femicide. So
Mm-hmm.
violence has become very normalized in our society, unfortunately. And, the norms and standard behaviors are what drive violence through the generations, because children who are witnessing or experiencing violence in their family or see it around them in their community will then have a higher risk of either using the same way of being or becoming victims of violence themselves. So there's a real vicious cycle. And
Yes.
yes, constantly seeing aggression and conflict and people retaliating violently, it can shift people's perceptions about what is acceptable. And social media can also, drive that, because it creates like a kind of a entertainment factor and reward system. And it can be, seen as entertainment, which is very sad. So,
Very,
yeah, I think that over time it becomes socially acceptable to see and behave in that way.
very true. Absolutely. On point, everything you said. For someone who's actually struggling with anger while driving, what coping mechanisms or techniques would you actually recommend to help them stay calm?
Yeah, this is a very important one. And I think, as a mental health professional, I think, helping people to be in touch with their emotions, it sounds all very wishy-washy, but it's actually really important. And I think it's not just about thinking. It's so when you are driving, it's about noticing actually what happens in your body first. Often the tension and the stress first shows up in your body. It's not a thought that you have, although can be a thought as well accompanying that feeling. But the first step is noticing things like, am I feeling tense? Am I tensing
Yes.
up my shoulders and my muscles? Is my heart beginning to race? Is my breathing getting shallower? And am I feeling those feelings of tension and anger? And once you become aware of this, the most important step is becoming aware first, so that you can stop and change the trajectory of what is happening, hopefully. So,
Yes.
there are some practical strategies.
Mm-hmm.
So the one is, because your brain is in that fight and flight state, it is important to try and slow down the racing heart and the shallow breathing. And one of the most basic things that people can do is actually to take slow, controlled, deep breaths. And then, one of the other things that you can do if you're especially feeling stressed is to put calming music on, or listen to a podcast that's calming.
Yeah.
Practical things like leave earlier so that you're not rushing from A to B, and you're safer on the road in that way.
Uh-huh.
Reframing, like when you see someone cutting you off, like trying to rethink. Maybe that person's not being rude on purpose. Maybe they're just late to get somewhere, or
Yeah.
maybe they're having a bad day. Trying to reframe assumptions about other people, that their behavior is not intentional.
Yeah.
And when you are being aggressively hooted at, or someone else is being aggressive towards you in the car, it's about trying to avoid engaging with them, trying not to respond to them in an aggressive way. Winning an argument on the road is never worth risking your safety, or one of your passengers' safety, or anyone else in the car or on the road safety. So, there's also some tips about not getting out of your car, finding a safe place to stop, but not getting out. And I think just trying to de-escalate the aggression is a good starting point.
Yeah, I think if we can also just, I like what you said. I mean, just reframe it. We tend to take things so personally. Somebody was rude to me on the road. As you said, they're probably just late. So then we can just reframe it and say, okay, maybe they are late, or maybe they need to be somewhere, and I can afford to do something kind and let them go, because a matter of few seconds and that moment is gone. So just reframe that and say, what that's my good deed for today. I often find that, and I teach my daughter this, that even if there's people that just want to keep cutting in and being rude, this is South Africa, right? I say, watch what I do. Let them go, and the karma works like this. When I need the way, you'll see what will happen, and it happens all the time. So we have to bring the lighter side in there as much as we
can. Razia. Yeah, I've also been doing that with I've got 3 boys. So we also on the way to school, we often get cut off, and sorry, no blame on taxi drivers, but often with taxi drivers. And I've learned now, sometimes I just stop and I smile and I wave, and often the guy will say sorry and then wave and smile. So then I'm like, okay, well, we've changed that interaction. What could have become left us both feeling angry and fuming has now been just So
correct.
I'm trying
in
as
that
well.
Minute.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In that minute, we can choose how we want to escalate it, to just let it go. We'll still get to where we need to, but how do we want to get there? But as you said, it begins with that self-awareness. How is my body feeling right now? And that power is very much within you. So you can control your breathing, or you can let it take control of you, and then everything can just play out in not a very nice way. And then we see incidents happening where lives are sadly affected, and it can go in all sorts. So I think we all can try and practice some of the tips that you've shared. It's been wonderful chatting with you, Thandi. You know what? When I introduced you, I was a bit confused because your name is not typically for a white. If you don't mind sharing that with us, I would love
not at all.
to understand that, because I'm fascinated.
It is quite an unusual story. So I'm actually from KZN. I grew up in Pietermaritzburg, and when I was a little baby, I had a Zulu nanny, and she gave me the name Thandiwe, which my family, we Afrikaans, very Afrikaans, but my family adopted the name and started using the name Thandi from when I was 6 months old. So I've never been known by my other name, which is Tia. I've always been known as Thandi, and I'm very, very, very proud and fond of my name, and I'm very grateful. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I knew there was a special story to it, and that's why I couldn't let you go without understanding it, because my mind was just going on. But that just shows how beautiful the world is when we can all just embrace the love that's given to us. Oh, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much, Razia. It's been so great. Thank you for inviting me on your show.
Only a pleasure. We thank you for your time as well, and drive safely. Keep giving those taxi drivers away, and I'm sure it will just start to change the whole energy for everybody on the road.
Absolutely. You too. Take care.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye.
And that was Thandi chatting with us. So, you heard her voice, but if you joined us on the screens, you would understand why I had to ask her about her name, which is such a beautiful story. Alrighty, so she's actually a clinical psychologist and Institute for Security Studies researcher, Thandi van Heiningen, and we were talking about road rage in South Africa. No, maybe part of rage, maybe part of my surname, but I promise you I'm very calm on the road. Let's go for a break. 11:40.